Hello, my name is Dan Peltz, CEO of Shift New Jersey. Also joining me is Melissa Kuntz, Chief Operating Officer.
Hello.
We've prepared a two-part training and presentation on the Division of Developmental Disabilities, DDD, and support coordination. We feel that the more individuals and families know about the DDD system, the better we can work together to find the best services and options to help individuals reach their goals. Welcome to the second part of our two-part training and presentation on services. In this presentation, we will go through the DDD system very thoroughly, its budgets and services, and go into greater detail about support coordination as well. Let's dive right into the DDD system. Under the DDD system, there are actually two different programs with some older programs still active as well. We will not discuss the older programs, but we wanted to show them in this presentation to highlight that a lot has changed in the past 5 years, during which time DDD has converted almost all of the individuals they serve into what is called fee-for-service, from one of the older programs into the two current ones. So what used to be true about programs and services might not still be true. In this presentation, we will highlight the two current systems, the supports program and the community care program. The vast majority of people entering the system at 21 will be going into the supports program, so we will start there.
Here are the supports program budgets, which are grouped by tiers, and also several budget categories. The budget categories will make a lot more sense once we start going through the services themselves, as some services can only pull money from specific budget categories. There's the employment and day budget, which is typically spent on employment and day services, such as day programs. There's the individual and family supports budget, and the supported employment budget, and the DSP service budget. As you can see, the supported employment budget does not have a number associated with it and is available as needed. This budget is used to ensure that individuals can have the supports they need to work in paid competitive employment. If someone needs one-to-one assistance to work and their budget is already maxed out from other services, they can get the employment supports they need through this budget. More information related to this and employment will come later on in the presentation. Access to this particular budget must be directly approved by DDD. The DSP budget is there due to state-mandated wage increases for direct support professionals. Many in the state feel as though people that provide direct support to individuals with disabilities are underpaid for their work, so built into the state budget are mandated increases in the rate that providers get paid. In order to accommodate this, rather than redo all of the budget category amounts, DDD created a new one to cover the increased rates. If an individual attends a day program, lives in a group home, or receives support from a direct support professional in the community, the rate was increased and is higher than can fit in the individual budget category, so they pull from the DSP budget. Lastly, you will notice that some of the budget tiers have a little A next to them. That stands for acuity. An acuity factor on a tier means that the individual has some unique needs, either medical or behavioral, that will require additional supports and funding. For example, you can have someone who is very independent but may have a seizure disorder that needs extra monitoring. This could lead to an AA tier. Next, we have several slides on the services that can be paid for through the DDD budget, and we will go through each. For each service on this chart, there is the name of the service, how much the service costs per unit, and which budget component it can be billed under. You will also notice that some services do not have prices, but list the letters R and C, which stands for reasonable and customary. For some services, it is not possible to determine a price, as it can vary depending on the circumstances. What is considered reasonable and customary for a particular service can also vary over time. Any service that lists this must be approved by DDD directly to ensure that the rate is reasonable. You will also notice that the billing units are often broken down into 15-minute increments. There are two reasons for this. The first is because Medicaid wants the amount of time a service is being delivered to be billed accurately. If you provide service for 45 minutes, you can bill for 45 minutes without rounding up to an hour or down to half an hour. The second reason is this allows providers to vary their services within the same hour. For example, a provider can do 30 minutes of pre-vocational training and 30 minutes of day habilitation in the same hour, rather than only being able to bill for one service. So the 15-minute billing increment is purposeful and useful.
So let's look at each service. The first is assistive technology. This is typically used for communication devices or software. Here's an example of no rate being given, as each communication device and where you get it from can vary in cost. Also, you can see that this service can only pull money from the individual and family support budget. Next is behavioral supports, which is simply the development and implementation of a behavior plan. Some of these services can look like an ABA type of service, and some day programs and group homes may also bill under this service if the individual that is attending needs a behavior plan in place. This service can pull money from any budget category. Next is career planning. This is a service that is pretty rarely used, since career planning can simply be done within the individual support system and also can be accessed through the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, or DVRS, for no cost. However, some providers have begun to incorporate this into their pre-vocational training programs and will bill under this service. This service can pull money from any budget category, and here is the first service in which the rate has increased, so it pulls from the DSP service budget as well. Next is cognitive rehabilitation, which is typically used specifically for individuals with traumatic brain injuries. Next is community-based supports, which is one of the most widely used services in the DDD system. A community-based support person can provide direct support and assistance for an individual, kind of like a one-on-one personal assistant. They can work in the individual's home or take them out into the community to help promote independence and inclusion within the community. For example, they can go to the movies or social events, and a community-based support can assist in teaching self-care, activities of daily living, and social skills. And community-based support people can be found through an agency, through DDD, or you can choose to hire your own as what's called a self-directed employee, or SDE. A self-directed employee can be a family member, but cannot be a spouse, parent, or guardian. For SDEs, you not only get to choose who you want to hire, but also how much you want to pay them, as long as it's reasonable and customary. We will discuss the organization that helps you hire SDEs a bit later, but you should know that all SDEs have to go through training, a background check, and drug testing prior to delivering services. Next is community inclusion services, which are mostly recreational activities outside of the home used to promote inclusion in the community, such as small group outings to a museum or sporting event. Community inclusion services can sometimes be billed by an individual's day program instead of traditional day habilitation. However, other than this, it is essentially the exact same thing as community-based supports, and there really is no need to separate the two categories.
Which leads to the next service, day habilitation, which is day programming, where an individual attends a center for a certain number of days or hours per week to build social, pre-employment, and daily living skills, in addition to occasional outings into the community to foster community inclusion. In this category, I want to point out that price changes based on tier. The logic here is that individuals with a higher tier will require greater support, and the rate should reflect this. Due to this increasing rate, if an individual goes to a day program 5 days per week, this will take up the entire day and employment supports budget, regardless of tier. The Medicaid rate setters have done the math to ensure that this happens. They did not do the math particularly well, partly because some day programs are open more days per year than others. It is common for day programs to be open 250 to 255 days per year, which sometimes requires individuals to take some days off outside of the normal federal holidays. Please see the chart shown here that shows the maximum amount of days each tier can attend a day program. Next is environmental modifications. Environmental modifications are any adaptations to an individual's residence that will ensure the health and safety of the individual. Again, as with assistive technology, this service has no particular set rate but is reasonable and customary. Examples of environmental modifications include ramps, bathroom modifications, grab bars, etc. Goods and services is the next service category. We will get into this category more in depth in a further slide, but essentially this is a miscellaneous category for goods or services which are not clearly providers for DDD. Interpreter services is a language interpretation service delivered in person to an individual to support them more fully in community or employment activities. Natural supports training is training and counseling for any unpaid caregivers of an individual. Training involves instruction to assist the unpaid caregiver in meeting the needs of the individual in their home. Natural supports is not a commonly accessed service by any means, and was mainly used when many individuals who were in residential facilities out of state were returned to receive services in New Jersey and live with their families again. Next is occupational therapy, which can be offered in a group or one-on-one. Only DDD qualified providers of occupational therapy are allowed to provide this service. To access occupational therapy, an individual must provide a written prescription of need from their doctor.
The next service is PERS, or a Personal Emergency Response System. PERS is an electronic device that enables individuals to call for help in an emergency situation. Typically, the system is connected to an individual's phone and sends a signal to a response center once a button for help is activated. The service includes purchase, installation, and a monthly service fee for a personal emergency response system. Next is physical therapy, which can be offered in a group or one-on-one. Again, as with occupational therapy, only DDD qualified providers of physical therapy are allowed to provide this service, and to access it, you must have a written prescription from a doctor. Next, we have pre-vocational training, which can be done both individually and in a group setting. Many day programs will build this into their day and billing structure, and some classes bill under this category as well. Next, we have respite. Respite is typically a break or a vacation type service for either the caretaker or the individual. For example, let's say you have a son or daughter in the DDD system and want to take a week-long vacation. You can have your son or daughter stay in a group home for a week or have supports come into your home instead. They also have hotel respite programs where individuals stay in a hotel. Day camps and overnight camps are also available in the DDD system and bill under this category as well.
Next is speech, language, and hearing therapies, which is similar to the other therapies offered in that you do need a prescription from a doctor for a certain number of hours. Although support coordination is shown here, it does not come from the individual's budget. Support coordination agencies are paid by the state directly. Next is supported employment, which is getting someone a paid competitive employed job and coaching them in that job. This can be paid for under either category, as well as the additional supported employment budget as well. Next is a fairly new service that DDD is just starting to roll out now. A supports broker will help you find a self-directed employee and other community resources. The task of finding a self-directed employee, if you do not already have one in mind, can be tough. The process involves posting ads, conducting interviews, and filling out a large amount of paperwork, including working with PPL, the fiscal intermediary. The supports broker helps with all of this. If you are looking for additional resources outside of DDD, the supports broker can help with this as well. Next is transportation, which is very complicated and the most difficult part of the DDD system. Transportation is another category that does not have a fixed cost, and the reasonable and customary rate the provider wants must be approved directly by DDD. The going rate is currently somewhere between $2 to $3 per mile, with $2.50 being the average. The problem with this is the rate is a budget killer. The budget was not meant to cover transportation costs at this rate, and it has often become an issue when individuals and families are forced to attend certain services less frequently than they would like to pay for transportation. Access Link is another decent option that is not covered by the budget. Many individuals like Access Link, but many more dislike it. Their time windows are inconvenient, and most areas of New Jersey do not have Access Link coverage. Some counties have good paratransit services as well, but these rely on volunteers, and if they do not have a driver available for the route, then you're out of luck. Uber and Lyft can be paid for through the budget now, as 1 to 2 companies that are familiar with DDD services have set up a system to buy Uber gift cards through the budget for individuals and set them up on the individual's phone. But this is billed at $3 a mile and drains the budget very quickly. You can also have a self-directed employee or community-based support drive as well, but finding someone that is willing to only drive is very difficult. Most community-based support agencies want a 2-hour minimum session, as it takes a while to get to and from the individual. The last service is vehicle modifications, which are self-explanatory and can be covered by the DDD budget.
We will now go back to the goods and services category to go into greater detail about this. This is a miscellaneous category that covers a number of different things. This service has to address an identified need, and you can't be able to afford it through any other means, although DDD will not check finances. It must be related to employment, community inclusion, or independent living, and this service should be available to the general public. The goal here is more community inclusion. For example, DDD does not want an individual to take a yoga class for individuals with special needs. They want an individual to take a yoga class that anyone else could take. Goods and services typically pays for classes, including at a community college. It will also pay for gym memberships, anything that is needed that fits the above criteria, although there are specifically excluded items which you can see by reading the full supports program manual. We will now move on to discuss the community care program, which is very similar to the supports program, but is for individuals who require a supervised or group home housing setting, which can include in-home supervision and care as well. An individual can still get housing when in the supports program, but this is in the form of a housing voucher that the individual can use to find an apartment in the community. Whereas in the CCP, this is for formal housing support arrangements. To gain eligibility for the CCP, there is a waiting list which is several years long. An individual also has to meet a certain level of support as well. If they are capable of living on their own with support, then a housing voucher will be issued instead. The community care program has very similar services and budgets as the supports program, except for an additional budget category called Individual Supports Provided Residentially and a higher DSP budget amount. This amount of money also corresponds to the cost of services on the next slide. This math works out so that if you multiply the rate by 365 days per year, it equals the amount in the budget category, and we'll use this entire budget amount.
There are also services outside the DDD system that you can access. The first, which is very commonly used, is a personal care assistant, or PCA, which is a home health aide. This is somewhat similar to a community-based support in the DDD system, as they are a one-to-one helper. However, a PCA or home health aide is only for self-care and cannot take the individual into the community. If a family member or someone of your choice wants to be the PCA, they can be. That is called the Personal Preference Program, or PPP. In order to access this service, PCA or PPP, you have to get a prescription from a doctor for a certain number of hours. Then call the phone number on the back of your MCO Medicaid insurance card. The MCO will send out a nurse to determine how many hours you could be eligible and approved for. Then once you get approved for a certain number of hours, you simply tell the insurance company if you want a home health aide through PCA or you want to be the caretaker under PPP. Other non-DDD services include medical day programs for individuals that are medically needy or elderly. There are also shelter workshops through DVRS. However, these are generally being phased out, and there are only a few workshops remaining. In these workshops, individuals typically engage in piecework, like putting together packets or assembling small items. It's very repetitive, and the pay is minimal. For both medical day programs and DVRS sheltered workshops, you can access these services, but you would lose a portion of the budget, your day program and employment budget specifically, based on the amount of days you attend, as DDD considers these services duplicative.
We want to discuss employment and working competitively for individuals with disabilities. New Jersey is an employment-first state, and what that means is that working should be the first option for individuals. And if employment is not pursued, there should be a reason why. DDD believes that everyone is capable of working in some capacity with appropriate supports. This is why there is an additional budget category in the budget that can provide for one-on-one assistance in a workplace. This being said, employment is not a requirement to get DDD services, and DDD cannot force an individual to work. This is still your choice. However, everyone should be at least moving in the direction of employment. Every plan that we write must have an employment outcome, and some work skills should be in process. For individuals that want to work, we send a referral to the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation Services, or DVRS. DVRS is an organization that helps people obtain and maintain employment. Some of the services they offer include vocational evaluations, job coaching. They can pay for college if there's a financial barrier to pursuing college, among many other things. Another organization that you should be familiar with is Public Partnerships LLC, or PPL. PPL is the state fiscal intermediary. What this means is that they process the payments for things that are not easily billed through Medicaid. For example, goods and services requests like a gym membership, transportation companies, college classes. Gyms are not Medicaid providers but still need to be paid. So PPL's job is to process forms and issue payment to make sure this service can be delivered. They also do this for self-directed employees that we mentioned earlier. PPL will mail out all of the required paperwork to families and support self-directed employees. They will process that paperwork and then issue payment. The reason why it is very important to discuss PPL in this presentation is because they're typically not very good at their jobs, and working with them can be very frustrating. They can take a while to process paperwork. When you call them for information, the customer service representative can give you incorrect or incomplete information, and their computer system errors can make the speed of payment an issue. Support coordination agencies do their best to facilitate this process, and we often spend hours calling PPL. I hope in the future that I'll have to revise this video because they have dramatically improved, but it's been 2 years already, so for now we have to keep this in the presentation.
So to summarize about potential difficulties and obstacles that may occur in the DDD system, there are really three main issues that individuals and families face. The first is a lack of available services or programs that meet your specific needs in your area. It could be because the providers have waiting lists or there just aren't providers in your area that can handle a specific circumstance or need, like the need for a program that can handle specific behavioral or medical supports. The next potential obstacle can be transportation. Some of the day programs provide transportation within a certain radius, but a lot of them do not, and getting an individual from one place to another in a cost-effective way can be very challenging. Sometimes there are no good options. The last issue that we just discussed are issues with PPL, who can make the process of hiring an SDE or getting a class paid for a very long one.
Now that you know about most of the DDD system's aspects, the last thing I want to cover is to review the role of the support coordinator, discuss what you should expect once you are assigned, and also some things to keep in mind about what support coordinators can and cannot control. The role of the support coordination agency is to be a case manager or act as a liaison between DDD service providers and individuals and families. The goal is for the agency to help the individual and families self-direct their services or choose their service providers and how these services will be delivered. Since the DDD system is complicated and has many policies and procedures, true self-direction can only occur through a support coordination agency. You as the individual or family of the individual are essentially the boss and tell us what we should put into the plan, but you also have to work within the parameters and procedures established by DDD and Medicaid. Other than helping individuals and families navigate DDD policies and procedures, the main responsibilities of the Support Coordination Agency are to write and revise the state plan in collaboration with the individual and their support system, and enter the services that will be delivered into the plan, and then monitor the individual on at least a monthly basis to ensure health and safety, and that there are no changes that require any revision of the plan. Support coordination agencies also reach out to DDD in certain situations, such as the occurrence of an unusual incident, housing issues, requests for a service that is not payable through Medicaid directly, or with questions on policies and procedures.
So what should you expect when you're assigned to an agency? Support coordination agencies get notifications of assignments via email, and then we will assign it to one of our staff members, who will typically call you on the same day or within 24 hours. The call is to introduce ourselves. It's also to schedule an intake. At this intake, we essentially find out everything there is to know about the individual. We'll go over the NJCAT in detail. We'll discuss support needs, goals, and required services. The only thing that we need from you is your Medicaid MCO card and copies of guardianship paperwork. Intake meetings typically last between an hour and a half to 3 hours altogether, and there will be some required forms for you to sign. After this meeting, we will write your plan, which is called an Individual Service Plan or ISP, which is similar to the IEP that you had in school. After we finish the plan, we typically email it to you and schedule a follow-up meeting. At this meeting, we finalize the ISP, and if everyone is in agreement, you sign it, and then we approve it. For services, we'll give you a list of all DDD approved service providers and go through each one with you in the first or second meeting, depending on what you're looking for. We will tour any that you're interested in and help you complete the intake paperwork. One of our requirements is to get a plan approved within 30 days of assignment, so we are going to want to meet quickly. Plans can also be approved without finding all services, and sometimes they have no services while we are looking for good services. This doesn't affect anything and helps us stay in compliance.
I want to go over some things that support coordinators are and are not in control of, and some important things to remember. Support coordinators have no control over your budget. That is dictated directly from the NJCAT, and we can tell you how to apply to take it again, but that is not a decision that we have any control over. We cannot control the availability of providers in your area. The providers each have their own intake and waiting list process and get to decide who they will accept into their programs. And sometimes there are no providers for what you are looking for. The vast majority of individuals we support have great services and programs and are very happy, but in some instances, individuals have had to choose from 3 not great options, and people do get mad at support coordination agencies that there is not more out there. We are always advocating to the state and encouraging providers to expand, but that is not something that we can directly control. The next obstacle is DDD's approval of goods and services requests and transportation requests. We put in the forms and information, but DDD ultimately decides if the requests meet the criteria and are at a reasonable price. We again do our best to advocate, but sometimes these requests are rejected, especially if the thing that is being requested is outside of the norm. Last thing we cannot control is PPL's performance. We call them often. We can advocate, yell, and do everything in our power to move the process along, but in the end it is up to PPL to do what needs to be done. After saying all that, I think it is important to note that the vast majority of people are very happy with their services and the DDD system. We recently conducted a survey of the individuals we support and found satisfaction higher than 90%. DDD system has its quirks and a lot has changed recently, but it is only getting better. This new fee-for-service system has led to more options and more choice of providers. You can also choose your case managers or support coordinators, which have much lower caseloads than DDD case managers had in the past. Each year there are more providers, and it is really a great system for 95% of people. For even more information, please check out the links on the screen. You can also reach out to us with questions at info@shiftnj.com. Thank you all for watching, and we look forward to working with you.